This is E&P Reports, a service of Editor and Publisher magazine. Since 1884, the authoritative voice of news publishing. Hi again, Mike Blinder, publisher of E&P Magazine. And recently, the Local Media Association did a survey of its members, which include newspapers, radio, television, pure plays, R&D partners, and more, to ask them what changes have occurred within their own environments thanks to the pandemic, and more importantly, their impressions of what will stick and not stick when we get out of this thing. Or to use that overused term, what will the new normal be? And some of this is pretty obvious, including a movement towards remote work, but some other items that came through this were a little revealing, and some, to me at least, unexpected. So the report was done by Local Media Association. Who better to talk to than the COO, Jay Small, as we ask him about the recent LMA survey of us, the news publishing industry, and more importantly, our perceptions of what changes we're up to and what's going to stick post-COVID-19. Hey, Jay, welcome to E&P Reports. This is our first interview together. You and I know each other, but Jay, you're CEO of Local Media Association. If you're in the media industry and you've been hidden under a rock, you have no idea what the LMA is, but most people do understand your organization and what your goal is. But quickly, for anyone else that's brand new, is just coming in and learning more, tuning in, give us the quick overview of LMA's mission.
LMA is all about finding new business models to help provide sustainability and long-term strategies for all kinds of local media, newspapers, TV broadcasters, radio broadcasters, digital only, and niche media as well. So we work with more than 3,000 local media outlets across North America and around the world. And our job is to try to make sure that local media and local news in particular remain viable business opportunities and remain viable community public servants.
The reason we reached out to you for today's interview was a very interesting report. I came across it in the press release you guys issued, and it was very telling about how the local media ecosystem is reacting to COVID-19. I mean, we're all like trying to figure it all out. What are we going to, what changes are going on? Why don't you give us quickly the history of this report? How did you put it together, and how did it grow? I understand it took a life on of its own, right?
It really did. We started out, LMA runs what we call Chief Digital Clubs. Mm-hmm. And that's 4 cohorts of a dozen or so people each from all corners of local media, and they are chief digital officers or digital leaders at groups ranging from Gannett and Graham Media and Scripps and some of the bigger media groups out there, all the way down to individual publications at local scale in small communities. We fielded this survey, or a light version of it, with them first and used it as discussion fodder. We're meeting with those groups every week during the COVID-19 crisis. We kind of felt that cadence was important to them, to have regular communications with each other and with us about what they were doing to cope with the circumstances that they found themselves in. So we asked the questions: what changes have you made as a result of the crisis and the resulting economic chaos to the media industry? And then we asked, okay, of these changes, when we get to whatever new normal will be, and I find myself apologizing for using the term new normal all the time, because people are almost as tired of that as hearing in these uncertain times. So I after this, I won't use that anymore. But we wanted to see what changes they felt that they had implemented would actually stick in normal, whatever that was going to be whenever we got to it. We also asked how long they thought it would take for us to get to a normal or something resembling business normal for local media. And once we had a chance to discuss those findings with the Chief Digital Club members, we realized we probably should field these same questions to our membership and our constituents in the local media industry. So we recrafted the survey slightly, asked a couple of other, I guess, qualifying questions and anecdotal questions as well. And you've seen the results. I think a lot of the interesting things are actually in some of the anecdotes and some of the things that people say. And then fielded it to our email distribution list. And we got 127 responses, probably not statistically significant, but certainly directional, because a lot of those responses were from group executives at some of the larger media companies. So the 127 represents probably a lot more media properties than just 127.
And you were managing to cover the entire spectrum: radio, TV, print, big and little, markets of all stripes, which I found fascinating. What was the timing of the study? Because I don't want to say the new normal ever again.
Right.
Now that you make me feel awful about that, or these uncertain times, but it's a moving timeline. So when precisely were you getting most of this response?
It ran in over 2 weeks in late May.
Late May.
Closed Friday before last. Today's we're talking about this on June the 2nd. So the most recent data in the survey is about a week old now, and of course other things have happened since then. We've had the death of George Floyd and the aftermath there, which it stands to reason that might have also affected the results. Certainly as it relates to timing of a return to normal. So nevertheless, it's fairly recent information. It's past sort of the first wave of economic impact of the crisis. So it is at a point where this is probably not the right term, but the crisis has matured a bit. And so people are starting to think about what happens and how quickly do we start a return to whatever normal is going to be.
All right, so give us the Cook's Tour overview right now of some of the key findings of this study.
Well, the key but not surprising findings across the board were that the top things that media companies are doing in response to the crisis are around enabling remote work and providing enabling technologies for remote work. Also interesting is that about 2/3 of the companies that indicated, the respondents that indicated they had embraced remote work, intend to at least keep some of it in place after the crisis abates and in whatever normal emerges.
That was telling to me, because I believe that crisis creates change.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people who never thought that they'd be comfortable working from their home are now saying, hey, wow, this is kind of cool. And managers are going, wait a second, I didn't need to bring everybody into a conference room. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
And there's a new comfort level through that, because that forced a quick change. So the first thing I saw is it looks like media companies may start being much more remote, correct?
Yes. And you think about all the implications of that, and sales organizations very, very well, better than I do probably. And there are a lot of sales managers that don't really want to see their account executives in the office all that much anyway, right?
Exactly. Yes.
So, in a sense, remote work should be something closer to old normal for those groups. News organizations, same thing. Reporters do a lot of work on the phone, yes, but a good reporter is out observing what's going on in the world and in the community. And, so it stands to reason that remote work would be an easier transition than a lot of companies might have expected. It also stands to reason that once you've gotten a taste of it, you might want to keep it around as long as your employees are delivering what they're capable of delivering and what you need them to deliver. I think even managers that might have been reluctant to embrace it before are, hey, it's okay, it works.
Did you see that across the board in TV, especially where, that reporter is chained back to the editing booths and all that and more? Where was there any disparity as you segmented it out among the media?
Actually, it was so broadly universal, and we got more respondents from newspaper companies than from broadcast companies, TV or radio. But of the TV and radio respondents we got, it was almost universal that they were embracing remote work where it made sense to do it, and that they were keeping it where it made sense to do it. Now, there are some pieces of equipment you can't take home with you in
Right.
broadcasting,
Right.
and so it's not that the buildings were deserted. It's just that those who could work remotely were being enabled to do so.
What else did you find through this study?
Well, the things that were, I think, more interesting, and where there was more of a difference of use between newspaper companies and the broadcasters, were around things like ad dollar matching programs. Newspapers embraced ad dollar matching programs at a higher rate in terms of real numbers and percentages than broadcasters did, though broadcasters were significantly on the board, and at least a plurality of them indicated they were doing some kind of ad dollar matching just to keep local direct dollars on the air. And certainly we were aware through Chief Digital Club of a lot of ambitious and given the circumstances, successful programs at newspapers to do ad dollar matching, again, just to keep dollars in ROP and to keep local dollars in digital. And much preferred over any kind of discount, because with a discount, the perception was that discount might stick post-crisis, where an ad dollar matching program could be gated by the timing of the crisis.
But this will likely not stay in place as
right.
Let's use that overused term, new normal.
Right.
It's being positioned to the local advertiser. We feel your pain. We're willing to match you dollar for dollar if you need to get your message out right now, correct?
Yeah, survey bears that out. Most of the people who implemented ad dollar matching programs during the crisis don't expect them to stick long term.
There you go.
And I think that's common sense that would be the case.
Next.
A couple of other things that were very interesting in the strategic or tactical changes that people did. More than half of the newspaper respondents began accepting community donations during the crisis. Almost nobody from any of the other groups, radio broadcasters, TV broadcasters, or we also included the industry R&D community. Those numbers were barely registered, but more than half of all the newspaper respondents, a significant number of companies, began accepting community donations. And that's likely to stick as well, at least according to the survey. And again, that stands to reason as newspapers continue to look for alternatives to disrupted advertising models.
Yeah. Or possibly moving into a nonprofit mode like the Salt Lake did, right? I mean, again, crisis creates change. What else? What else came out of this survey?
Well, some of the other changes that were that at least I considered to be good strategies, and I think you might agree. About a third of all the respondents had taken the opportunity, with sales teams not necessarily on the bench, but maybe not getting as many returned calls from clients, or not being able to set appointments, at least not in-person appointments. They took the opportunity from that lack of activity to implement sales training, sales transformation programs, looking ahead at new sales structures. So this was also pretty strong across all of the media groups, and even the R&D companies were saying, hey, we're not closing a lot of business right now. We have a little bit of a gap in activity. So why don't we use this time to level up on our skills and make sure we've got our structures optimized, make sure we've got our processes optimized. Some of them are implementing or accelerating the timetables on CRM implementations or
There you go.
upgrades. So, take advantage of even though, a lot of account executives might not agree that it's downtime. The reality is they may not be quite as busy right now as they were before the crisis. And so use the time to catch up on the state of the art.
There's no question, as someone who spent years at media companies, when you implement a CRM, it completely, totally bogs down because everybody, I mean, just everybody slows down, getting out on the street, watching those darn videos. It seems that's a very smart move. I mean, while you got these people sitting in front of screens, get them trained up on any new technologies. How did
Right.
anywhere in this, or at least in your conversations, did R&D partners take advantage of that? Were they trying to get more and more of their products out there at the time and say this is a great time to change, innovate, if I can use an LMA term?
What we saw R&D companies doing is being very aggressive in terms of offering virtual services not only to their clients and their prospects, but doing things such as offering subject matter expertise webinars to local media clients. As a way to help local media sales teams keep their clients engaged, which I think, obviously pays back some benefits to the R&D companies as well in terms of deepening client relationships. I don't know that I personally have seen as many R&D companies with new business outreach during this time. But that's not to say they're not doing it. It's just that maybe from my little corner of the world, I haven't observed it.
Well, as someone who E&P, the lion's share of our revenue comes from those R&D companies, where
Mhm.
an advertise, whether it's digital, print, email, what have you. And I would say no. I mean, business has been flat, or
Yeah.
I mean, down, but I'm not seeing a bunch of saying this is a great time to scream outsource. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, which is
Yeah.
a negative message, obviously, to the team. Because you're saying fire a few people and use our tool, but I haven't seen a lot of that, at least on our side of the equation.
The one thing I will mention is that and I think this is a consequence of how stretched and how busy the news organizations have
Yeah.
been. I'm seeing a lot more buzz about we really need to change our CMS.
Hmm.
And that might lead. I don't know if anybody's going to pull the plug on a major CMS and make a big conversion right in the middle of the crisis, but it probably will lead to some business development opportunities for site platform companies. As we emerge from the depths of the crisis, and some of these companies realize, yeah, here's what I'll equate it to. It's like we've all been stuck at home for weeks and months, right? I'm imagining that home improvement companies and new
Through the
home
roof.
builders are going to see a boom when this is all over.
Oh no, they're seeing it now. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Home improvement people, that's one category that's on fire because you're right. When sitting around the home, you're saying, let's fix this. This isn't working
Yeah.
like it should because you're spending more time with those appliances or in that environment. It's interesting though that this would be a good time for a vendor to say, and I can see why, obviously the CMS, because if it's clunky, or it
Yeah.
doesn't operate well across the web or on a mobile device with everybody being out there, you'd make the switch now. I mean, you would
Yeah.
say, okay, let's clean it up. Let's streamline our content management.
Yeah, biggest ongoing news story of the century, and of anybody's career who's alive right now.
Hmm.
And if you're working on technology that you feel is holding you back at a time when also, your company may have had to cut back. So your buddy in the cubicle next door may not be there anymore, real or virtual, as an employee of your news organization. So you may be having to stretch yourself even thinner, and having platform technology that doesn't work seamlessly with you. It might be a good time to consider making a move, or at least making an upgrade.
I didn't see a lot of changes. You issued the report, at least to me. I don't know if you did it to the industry that way. And we will, at the end of this dialogue, make sure that anybody listening can get a copy of it, correct? That can
Yes.
come to you. But you sent me two copies, one which was the total numbers and then the segmented based on industry. I didn't see a lot of change in there. Did you? Did you see any major disparity between newspapers and radio, TV, and pure play? Where was that?
The biggest disparities were a little bit what I'll call down survey, which were some of the responses that were not like remote work almost universally. Yes,
Right.
we're doing that. And it came in things like, I already mentioned community donations. Almost nobody in broadcasting is accepting community donations. And it's just they're in a different place in their history right now. But it got down to things like travel bans or restrictions, adjusting PTO or vacation or sick leave policies. More broadcasters did that by far than newspapers or R&D companies.
Interesting.
And let's see, yeah, with travel bans, it was mostly the TV companies that did travel bans.
Interesting.
I don't know if that's symptomatic of the relatively few newspaper companies. They may have already had limited travel just because of the overall state of their economic health
Well, you already
prior
know.
to the
You already
crisis.
know the answer to that because with the mega conference, we noticed a lot of these larger media companies sent very less people this
Yeah.
year. I mean,
So that it may just be that they already had travel bans, but they weren't because of the crisis, so they wouldn't respond that way.
yes,
Um, and you know, implementing new subscription programs or modifying subscription
well,
programs,
that would
that
be
was overwhelmingly a newspaper thing.
of course.
And even there, the modifications, if you read through the anecdotes, the modifications were predominantly around making COVID-19 content free outside a paywall in digital, and maybe implementing some discounted entry rates for new subscriptions during the crisis, which we've seen a lot of companies do. And we've seen companies that have grown their subscription numbers through those programs. What remains to be seen is, will they stick when the trial periods end?
There you go. So as we get into that, let's use that term one last time, and then we should have a drinking game every time someone says new normal. It's a little. But in the new normal, will those stick? And that's another.
Yeah.
Because right now, media companies, some of them are taking advantage of the fact that people are craving their news. Digital subscriptions are up, local traffic is up. No discussion whatsoever among broadcaster paywalls, right? And starting to hide their content. Nothing like that.
The closest we got to that, and it wasn't really revealed as much in the survey as it has been in some of our other projects and programs. Broadcasters are interested in things like membership programs, and still trying to figure. I mean, we have an active project with three broadcast groups that's all around developing strategies for membership programs for television stations and television groups, but it's still a pretty nebulous world to think about what critical mass of content, services, and events and other things might incent a paid membership, or even a membership where you're basically paying with your personal information and attention as currency.
Okay. So there's a lot of need now to try to capture that person and keep them through some form of membership, some form of all that and more. All right. So anything else we're missing here? Any other bullets that came out of it that you'd like to share?
Well, I think the other big piece was just on timing,
Okay.
and that's where the interesting thing was the survey, broadly speaking, and then when you break down by segments, divided optimism versus pessimism on how quickly we will emerge at something resembling normal at 9 months. And
From the date of
exactly
the survey.
50% of the respondents were in the groupings that were less than 9 months. And the first response was less than 1 month. So the survey closed a little more than a week ago. So we've already got a week gone since in that 1 month time. I don't know how many people would still answer less than 1 month, but and the high end was a year or more. The difference there is, doesn't matter which group you asked, breakpoint was at 50 at 9 months. But Broadcasters were a little more pessimistic. None of them responded 1 month or less, and more of them responded a year or more than the other groups. So not a ton more pessimistic, but for some reason, I would have expected. Honestly, I would have expected the newspaper companies to be more pessimistic, but the broadcasters were more pessimistic about timing of return to normal.
Well, yeah, let's be honest. They're going to get the lion's share of the political ad dollars. I could discuss whether that's good or bad, right or wrong, but there's still going to be a big political year for broadcast. So basically, we're discussing, at least in their prognostications, that let me take a drink, the new normal will be next year. It's definitely falling into 2021. And
even if you're looking at 9 months, you're into next winter, and if you're looking at a year or more, you're into next spring, almost summer, before you feel like you're back to normal. And that's one where I'm not going to put on my wizard hat or my tinfoil hat and try to tell you who's right, but there is a pretty clear sense that this is not going to be over quickly.
All right, so let me just see if we can sum up. If someone wanted to get this all condensed into the 5 major bullets, and then correct me if I'm wrong. Number one, we are learning to be more remote as an industry, and that will likely stick with us, which means don't invest in commercial real estate. I think if you think about it, people are getting more comfortable. Hey, I can operate out of my home. I can do this. I can still, I don't need to be in that work environment, and managers are starting to accept that. The other big takeaway I heard here is the industry is looking for new solutions. Possibly the R&D people aren't stepping up to that as quickly as they should. They're figuring it out as they go. But this would be a great time, if I may say, because E&P, we help you market those solutions. So do you. This would be an amazing time to start talking to these companies about ways they can be more streamlined, more efficient, and obviously more cost efficient. Do we agree?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would also tell you, it's in context of a lot of these companies. We get this through our Chief Digital Club interactions and other means. A lot of these companies are in the middle of sort of a perpetual reforecast of the rest of this year, and starting to think about it. A lot of companies start taking a look at the next year in the summertime of the current year. And so they would be thinking about things like capital budgets and technology that they want to invest in, and operating efficiencies as well. So yeah, I think if you even assume that the crisis, we may not have hit bottom yet, but if you even assume that the crisis has matured to a point that people have to start thinking ahead, then as an R&D company, it stands to reason that you would start thinking ahead as well and start your outreach with that in mind.
Obviously, and this was a no-brainer. The newspapers are definitely looking for more membership contribution. They want to get paid in some way, shape, form, or size for those that are accessing their content, at least digitally. And I found it fascinating. This, like you, I would have thought the newspaper industry would have been more negative than the broadcasters, but you saw that just opposed. The broadcasters saw a much bleaker future than the newspaper industry, right?
Yeah, it wasn't a huge difference, but it was significant, and it just saw that it was going to take longer to bounce back. And I'm struggling to identify the exact circumstances that would make broadcasters less pessimistic. And it makes me wish I had asked a follow-up question about why did you answer the way you did when it came to the timing question.
Now, full disclosure, my first association, your COO of LMA, my first conversation, just as coronavirus hit, was Earl Wilkinson of INMA, International News Media Marketing Association, which is much more global than you. You guys are global, but if you ask Earl, most of his membership is Asia, Europe, South America. You know what I mean? He has that global presence. He was predicting, if you're interested, just that interview I think was early March. Okay, that's just as we were getting into it. He said we're all thinking, because he did a similar study, 90 days. This will all be over by now, and it just didn't quite it's been a lot longer of a struggle. Any final thoughts from just what you drunk in from now from Jay Small, not from the survey? Anything that you know, with your years and years in this industry, what would you
Well,
like?
it does. I think just reading through, and I read through a lot of the anecdotal comments again today, and I think I'm always amazed at the resilience of leaders in this industry, and that cuts across all the different segments. Yes, newspapers are at a different point as a business than TV broadcasters or even radio broadcasters. But they all have their secular challenges, and they all have their specific challenges related to this crisis. But people are finding silver linings. They're finding new opportunities. And I would distinguish that from being opportunistic and from playing on a crisis for for money or sympathy. But it's just people are launching new products in the middle of this and accelerating things that they really needed to do months ago or years ago, and just using the time wisely. So yes, it's a little discouraging to see that a lot of the workforce cost cuts that were implemented during the crisis, those may stick around some too. And again, that's especially a newspaper thing. But that may just be part of take a drink, the new normal, that we're once again being asked to do more with less. And at the same time, we're seeing some signs of implementing strategies that people wanted to do all along, but the crisis sort of forced their hand, and in a good way. So it's always encouraging to see those silver linings emerge. And I think the one takeaway I had from this, again, I don't want to make too much of the numbers, because the number of respondents, it does not, any good statistician would tell me the number of respondents does not constitute a valid nationwide sample or North American sample. But I do think that the anecdotes, the stories that are told beneath the numbers, are really where you see some reasons to be encouraged and some signs of enthusiasm for what's to come.
Someone wants a copy of this this study. Where will they go and where will they find it?
They can get our top line report on it. I wrote as an article on our website, which is at localmedia.org, and that is still linked from the homepage. So you can just go to localmedia.org and it's right there. Anyone who wants to get the actual copies of the report data could contact me directly, and my email address is just j.small@localmedia.org.
There we go. Now I have to ask the most important question of the day. Over my left shoulder is the E&P logo. Over your right shoulder, there is a gentleman or a woman, it's hard to say, playing pool. Was that one of your favorite pastimes, or what is the?
Well, I do like to play pool, but I'm horrible at it. But that's a poster of Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, and the Tasmanian Devil shooting.
Oh, now I
and that I've had that in my office, every office I've had for the last 20 years. It was actually a gift from my mother, so it means a lot to me, and I'm a huge Looney Tunes fan anyway.
Isn't this amazing what we're learning about people as we see? I see a new normal in broadcast news, because you and I both know that in the old days, pre-COVID-19, they would spend a lot of money bringing that guest in overnight to get into New York City, put them up in a very expensive hotel, limo them in so they can be part of the morning news panel. Now, you're seeing everybody in their living rooms, and we're getting used to that as a viewer. I don't think they're going to be flying a lot of people into those studios to be part of those morning programs anymore. I think
why would you?
Why? We're all comfortable with it now, and that way I can see, I don't know, I can see some Talking Heads living room in their Daffy Duck poster, over their shoulder as well. Jay, I hope you stay healthy and well. Kudos to the great work LMA is doing. We'll check back with you later on here at E&P. Have a great day, sir.
All right. Thanks, Mike.